Totes the tuts, hits night spots, carries plants and visits ants.
Back in 1978, Chrysler introduced their first front-wheel drive American-made subcompacts, the Dodge Omni and Plymouth Horizon, to compete with cars like the Chevette, Corolla, Civic, Pinto, and Golf. Lasting 12 model years, spawning two-door coupe and pickup models, and high-performance models backed by Carroll Shelby, the Omni and Horizon helped secure the loans Chrysler needed to avoid going under. This is the story of the Dodge Omni and Plymouth Horizon. This is my old car.
And you, tens of thousands of happy Omni buyers, have made our little car a star.
The new Dodge Omni does it.
Many requests from viewers have come in for the Omni and Horizon, or Omni Horizon as they are sometimes called. A big thank you again to the many ideas and suggestions for future episodes. Keep sending them in, and you'll be keeping me busy for many more months to come. The Omni and Horizon can trace their roots back to a model made by French automaker Simca. Although Simca was previously affiliated with Fiat, Chrysler took a controlling interest in Simca by 1963, taking over the design and production of the Simca 1100. By 1975, looking to replace the aging 1100, Chrysler Europe reverse-engineered several Volkswagen Rabbits to help develop what would eventually evolve into the American Omni and Horizon.
Dodge Omni?
It's a Volkswagen Rabbit.
No, it's not. It's an Omni.
It's
I know it's an
Volkswagen
Omni.
GTI.
French automaker PSA, who owns the Peugeot and Citroën brands, and also owned former British automaker Talbot, acquired Chrysler Europe in 1978 and began selling the car as the Horizon, but at various times under the Simca, Talbot, or Chrysler brands. Although the European Horizon was intended to be a world car, looking very similar to the Omni and Horizon we later saw in America, the cars evolved differently following the PSA takeover. Much like how the Ford Escort had also intended to be a world car, the resulting L-body platform differed from the European version to meet American requirements and preferences. The European version didn't last as long as it did in America, with the Simca Talbot Horizon lasting only until 1987, 3 years less than the American Omni and Horizon. Prior to the introduction of the Omni and Horizon, Chrysler's only subcompact offering, the Dodge and Plymouth Colt, wasn't even their own car,
How did Dodge Colt put so much in such a little car?
instead being an import from Chrysler's subsidiary, Mitsubishi. But just like the Colt, little was done to differentiate the Dodge and Plymouth models, other than different grills, tail lamps, and badging. Although a few years later, the Dodge would offer a special trim level you couldn't get on the Plymouth. More on that later. Because of it having front-wheel drive, the Omni and Horizon really only had two direct and significant competitors in 1978 that were also front-wheel drive: the Honda Civic, and of course the Volkswagen Rabbit, better known as the Golf outside the US, since it heavily influenced the Omni and Horizon's design. Other subcompacts for sale at the time, such as the Chevy Chevette, Ford Pinto, and Toyota Corolla, were rear-wheel drive, although the Toyota would later switch to front-wheel drive. The Chevette and Pinto never changed their drivetrain during their entire run, although the Pinto's replacement, the Escort, did have front-wheel drive. Front-wheel drive cars were still an exception more than the rule in the late 70s, and as a result, some media outlets tended to criticize them for having poorer handling than rear-wheel drive cars. Consumer Reports published a report that said the Omni and Horizon could lose control in hard maneuvering. But unlike a similar report they did against the Suzuki Samurai, which ultimately pushed Suzuki out of the American market, the Chrysler model sales clearly were not impacted by the negative press. The reverse engineering of the Volkswagen Rabbit resulted in a body design that resembled the Rabbit, and initially they even used a Volkswagen design 4-cylinder engine, although some parts of the engine were built by Chrysler. They only made 75 horsepower, but were better than nothing since at the time, Chrysler didn't have any other option. If you had an Omni or Horizon 5-door hatchback between 1978 and 1980, you only had a base or custom trim level to choose from. But that didn't hurt sales, with a combined total across Dodge and Plymouth of over 180,000 sold the first year, and a total of 542,000 sold during the first 3 years. Just over 300,000 of those sales, or around 56%, were for Plymouth, and most model years going forward, the Plymouth had higher sales. This was a bit of an anomaly in the Chrysler world, as typically the Dodge models would sell better whenever they had twin models across the two brands. By 1979, the Omni and Horizon became the best-selling Chrysler model line. The impressive sales numbers played a major role in Chrysler securing government funding to keep the company afloat. Although many may think the Aries and Reliant K cars saved Chrysler, they didn't debut until 1981. Instead, their existence was due to the $1.5 billion in government loans, earned thanks to the Omni and Horizon. These loans were used to develop the K car, and later, Chrysler's famous minivans. By 1981, the same 84 horsepower four-cylinder found in the new Chrysler K cars was available in the Omni and Horizon as an option, and by 1983, a Peugeot-built 62 horsepower four-cylinder replaced the Volkswagen engine. Also by 1981, the base model trim was renamed the Miser to compete against the Chevette Scooter and the new for that year Ford Escort. An upgrade from a 4 to a 5-speed manual was available this year, but sadly the cool wood grain panel option was discontinued that year as well, replaced with a Euro sedan trim that blacked out the chrome. But the L-body platform wasn't just used for the four-door models. Back in 1979, the L-body platform was expanded to include a two-door coupe model, known as the Omni 024 for Dodge and the Horizon TC3 for Plymouth. Unlike the Chevette and Escort, which had the same overall look between two and four-door models, the two-door Omni and Horizon looked like completely different cars than the four-door, with no body panels shared. They definitely looked more sporty, and therefore looked faster than the four-door, but initially they shared the same 70 horsepower Volkswagen engine as the four-door. However, by 1981, you could get the legendary Charger nameplate as a trim level on your 024, which had the K car's 2.2-liter four-cylinder. That's right, the same Charger name which was once on cars with a 7-liter Hemi V8 was now on a four-cylinder car that only had a quarter of the horsepower. There was even a trim level named after Alejandro de Tomaso, more famously known for the Pantera mid-engine sports car. By 1983, the 024 and the TC3 names for the two-door models were phased out. The 024 dropped the Charger trim and instead had all models called the Dodge Charger, and the TC3 became the Plymouth Turismo. In 1982, the L-body platform was used as a starting point for one of Chrysler's more unusual offerings, the Dodge Rampage. This El Camino wannabe extended the 024 and TC3 wheelbase by 8 inches, keeping the same design from the windshield forward, but swapping out the rear seats and hatchback for a pickup bed. With a load capacity of 1,145 pounds, it was only slightly less capable than the car it was intended to compete with, the Chevy El Camino, at 1,250 pounds. Starting in 1983, a rebadged Dodge Rampage was also offered for Plymouth, called the Scamp, but with only around 3,500 sold, it only lasted that one model year. So if you own a Scamp, you have a rare car, although I'm not sure that makes it any more valuable. The Rampage did better, with over 37,000 units sold over 3 years, but not enough to keep it going beyond 1984. 1984 was a big year for the Dodge Omni, with new trim levels that changed its potential market audience. The Miser trim was dropped, and although an SE or Sport Edition trim was available this year, the trim level most everyone remembers is the Dodge Omni GLH.
Dodge Omni GLH. No more Mr. Nice Guy.
What was originally going to be called the Coyote,
Let's go with the name Coyote because it eats rabbits.
it instead got the name GLH. And although Dodge didn't spell it out in their advertising, everybody knew that GLH stood for Goes Like Hell. The legendary Carroll Shelby came up with the name, and his company upgraded the old K-car four-cylinder from 84 to 110 horsepower. This engine actually debuted in 1983 as an upgrade to the former two-door 024 and TC3 models, badged as a Dodge Shelby Charger, and the Plymouth Turismo Duster. In 1985 and 86, Carroll Shelby offered an upgrade on the Omni GLH to a turbo 2.2-liter making 146 horsepower. Called the GLH-T, it also had revised ground effects to make it look a little bit more sinister. The same was also offered on the two-door Shelby Charger model. There even was some early plans to market a Plymouth version of the Turismo with the turbo and revive the Barracuda name, although it never came to be. But 1986 was the biggest year for Omni fans, thanks to the addition of the GLH-S model, which stood for Goes Like Hell Some More. Shelby Automobiles purchased the final 500 copies of the 1986 GLH-T, all painted black, and upgraded the turbo to reach 175 horsepower, as well as retuned intake and exhaust manifolds, added stiffer springs, and larger tires on Shelby-designed wheels. Although they were sold at select Dodge dealerships, they were marketed as a Shelby model, not as a Dodge. The GLH-S was actually faster in the quarter mile than 1986 Camaros and Firebirds, with 305 cubic inch V8s, and the 1986 Ford Mustang, with a 302 cubic inch V8. Although later Mustangs and Corvettes could meet or beat the GLH-S, it was an amazing achievement for a four-cylinder turbo. In 1987, Carroll Shelby also purchased the last 1,000 models of the Dodge Shelby Charger and upgraded them to have the same engines and enhancements as the Omni GLH-S. So these cars were sold as the Shelby Charger GLH-S, also without the Dodge name. But 1987 would also be the last year of the Charger and Turismo models, being replaced by the two-door versions of the Dodge Shadow and Plymouth Sundance. Originally, Chrysler had planned on the four-door Shadow and Sundance to replace the Omni and Horizon, but the latter sales were strong enough that they continued on through 1990. In 1987, Chrysler introduced the America trim level to become their new low-price value trim, which helped increase the sales to their highest level of over 237,000. However, sales dipped below 100,000 by 1989, the first time that had happened since 1982, and 1990 sales were well below 40,000. There was no official replacement for the Omni and Horizon, since their original intended replacements, the Shadow and Sundance, had already been on the market for 3 years. The Dodge Omni and Plymouth Horizon were likely the first new car for many back in the 70s and 80s, and unless you were lucky enough to have one of the special Carroll Shelby models, you knew that you weren't going to get anywhere fast. But owning one of these cars meant that you helped keep Chrysler afloat for many years to come. Thanks for watching. If you liked this episode, click the like button and subscribe to my channel. If you once owned a car from the 80s to mid-2000s that you rarely see today, and you would like it featured in a future episode, leave a reply in the comments or email me at the address shown here. See you next time.
For their country.